Hope you love the channel and find it useful in becoming a happy retiree. Subscribe today. If you pop your head up out of your own real estate bubble, you're going to realize just how relative the concept of financial independence really is. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And it all starts with real estate. Where you choose to live, the single biggest variable in your long-term cost of living and your financial independence. That's really what matters. Think about what it really takes to live in America. That's the topic today. We're talking the $500,000 formula, which I just recently wrote about in the AJC, and then what it costs to live in the big city. Got to be careful about where you end up living in retirement. The cost of real estate can make or break all of your retirement plans. For most families in America, $500,000 is this important financial checkpoint we got to get to, all of us. And I don't want all of the reports, and we've been Susie Orman bashing lately, and you know what we're going to do? We're going to continue to do it today because of the financial fear-mongering that she's been thrown out, along with the Legg Mason Global Asset Management Study, which scares Americans half to death, only looks at the top 1%, and makes it seem like there's no way in America you're ever going to get to a point of being able to stop working. And that's what I'm trying to fight against here on Money Matters this morning. So don't let reports of $2.5 million bungalows in Palo Alto and Mateo County, San Mateo, scare you away from planning for a comfortable retirement. So that's why we're here on Sunday mornings to try to help. I know the roads seem a little light today. So if you're not listening or you don't get a chance to listen, I sure hope that you tell your friends, oh, I missed Money Matters on Sunday morning. No problem. Go to iTunes and just download the podcast. Wes Moss, Money Matters on iTunes, or just go to wesmoss.com underneath the radio tab. You can listen to this rant we're about to embark on together about real estate. I even went back and looked up the real estate zip code of where I grew up. We're going to talk about where you and I grew up in America. And it's a lot different than what cities and towns and zip codes really get press and headlines today. We're talking real estate today and getting to that crucial $500,000 mark in America. Not $1.5 million, not $2 million, not $3 million. We got to get to $500,000 first before we can start really thinking about slowing down work. And I know it's still a big number, but it is doable for a large percentage of Americans. And I also want to talk about how to get there. I want to back in how to get easily to $500,000. And the numbers, when you really look at how easy these numbers are, it just takes time and a little discipline. And we're going to cover that too. Think about what it really takes to live in America. Here are the 5 big pillars of any livable budget. Of course, boom, food, shelter. Those are really the 2 staples. Then healthcare, transportation, education. Those are the 5 pillars. You're raising a family in America. Those are the 5 biggest pieces of the budget. Once you're retired, you really only need to worry about the first 4. Food, healthcare, transportation, shelter/housing. The first 3 are about the same no matter where you live in America. Food, unless you live in Montana or Hawaii, it's all pretty much the same. You got to some of these remote areas in America that takes a long time to get food to. Sure, you're going to pay 30, 40% premiums to do so. But the vast majority, 99% of America, food is pretty much the same price, pretty affordable. Healthcare, same thing. Medicare costs, once you get to 65, we're talking about getting a retirement, very much the same, whether you live in Florida or California or Georgia. Transportation, almost exactly the same no matter where you live. Sure, if you're in New Jersey, you're telling me, hey, Wes, the cost of gas is a lot extra up here because of all of the taxes and all the tolls we have to go through. But listen, transportation, almost exactly the same no matter where you live. Take out Manhattan, take out New Jersey, and again, we're talking about pretty much the same. But GMC is a GMC in Michigan or Atlanta or Palo Alto or Santa Barbara or one of the most expensive places in America, Suffolk County, Mass, Boston. And I'm not even going to try my Boston accent today. So if you're listening from Boston, you know what I'm talking about, how those brownstones cost millions and millions of dollars for just a couple maybe 1,000, 2,000 square feet. So real estate is the great equalizer in financial independence, or maybe it's the disequalizer in financial independence, whether that's a reality for you or not. And that's one reason that your boilerplate financial planning articles that get churned out regularly from the fear-mongering Wall Street can be so misleading. We've referenced this before. The Legg Mason Global Asset Management Study says that retirees in America, and this is one of the most prevalent retirement studies you will find. Just go Google, what does it cost to retire? How much do I need to retire? This is going to be one of the top hits. It's been out for about 2 years, and firmly says the retirees in America, they've got to get to at least $2.5 million to make it work. $2.5 million, that's at least. So as soon as you hear that, you say, wait a minute, that's a lot of money. You and I both know that if you have $2.5 million, you are in actually a very small group in America. You are in a very small minority in America. And you've heard these numbers. Hear all the people that don't have this much money. I'll rattle off a couple other scary statistics. Nearly half of Americans have no retirement savings at all, according to the Economic Policy Institute, the EPI report. And this is data from the Federal Reserve Board's Survey of Consumer Finances. And this is a big study. They partner with NORC, which is the National Opinion and Research Center, University of Chicago. And they collect data from almost 7,000 families and households around America. So it's not like some tiny little small sample set. This is a real survey that really gets to the heart of America. Here are some of those numbers. Nearly half, 50% of working age families in America have zero saved in retirement accounts. Nothing. Nearly half of America. There's 125 million households in America. That's a big number. The median, and I want to emphasize median here, which is a better way to look at American families versus the mean or the average, which will get skewed by a few billionaires that live in America. The median in America only have $5,000 saved. That's what the average family for retirement's ready to go with. The haves in America, let's call this it's really the 90 percentile or greater, have $275,000 saved. Now, these numbers are, again, they're in coordination with the Federal Reserve Board Survey of Consumer Finances, but these haven't been updated since 2013. But I can tell you the numbers aren't hugely different than they were in 2013. Yes, the stock market has done exceedingly well for the last couple of years, but remember, we're still talking about the richest 10% of America, the haves. The richest 10% of America, the haves, still only have, let's call it slightly less than $300,000 saved to retirement. $300,000. This is the rich group. The super haves, now let's talk about the people that you hear about and read about all the time. The super haves, let's call it the top 1%, not the 0.1 percentage, but the 1%ers have about $1.1 million on average saved. And I get this question a lot. Hey, Wes, is this enough? How much do other people have? It doesn't feel like I've got a lot. I'll have a family I'll sit down with, they have $1.5 million, and then they'll say, gosh, I don't feel like I have a whole lot. I've got $1.5 million. It doesn't feel like I'm rich at all. I can probably get to retirement and make it work, but it's not like I've got a lot of extra. Well, if you're at that level, you're still 99% or more of Americans have less than that. That's what's so fascinating when you really dig into the numbers in America for financial planning. You'll realize that it is if you live in a world where you have $1 million and you feel like it's not a lot, even though it's your entire world, you're still in a tiny little bubble. Even in America, you're still in a very, very small percentage of folks that have been able to accumulate this much money. And another thing I want to talk about today is how to get there. So when you look at a study, and the one we're talking about from Legg Mason, the data suggests that, and they're looking at a group of Americans that skews big time. It's toward the very high end of the U.S. population. The data that they're showing that says, hey, you need to at least $2.5 million if you're going to retire in America. The survey and the data that they're compiling, the average person has $385,000 in their retirement account. You compare that to the national data from the EPI or the Federal Reserve that I looked at, and we're talking about a sample set that's between the 90th and the 99th percentile in America. And that means that we're looking at families that live in some of the very richest parts of America. Some of these ultra-wealthy zip codes, they throw the real cost of living for most Americans, you and me, it throws it for a loop. Let's look at some of these numbers. Again, this is some of America gets real estate pricing is ludicrous. California, the whole state. It's not just the coast. The coast is what skews this number so high. The average home price, list price, California, is right at $700,000. Average. Massachusetts, $600,000. New York, $565,000. Now you dig a little deeper into those high-end metro areas, the areas that get all the hype. San Mateo, Palo Alto, Marin County, Santa Barbara, Suffolk County, Boston, Mass, New York, New York. Wait till I talk about some of these average zip code prices that'll throw you for a loop. I want to go through the formula of how you just easily get to $500,000 from a savings perspective. I know it's still a big number, but I want to go through some of the math that gets us there if you're investing in the S&P 500 or some sort of index that over time has actually gotten around a 10% rate of return on average every year. Wait a minute, what? That sounds like a lot, but it's actually been more than that. And the market very often doesn't get credit for that because there's been so many periods of time that have been so painful and so in the other direction. That's what you remember, and that's the scar that we have as investors, that we remember those really difficult times like 2001, and we remember 2007, 2008, and 2002, and 1990, and all the periods of time where markets either didn't go anywhere, like the early 1990s. We remember days like 1987 where we dropped 20+% in one day, and then we remember the corrections of 40 and 50% that we lived through, and they scar us from believing in markets, and it takes away our optimism. And those who have lost optimism are those who have not been able to harness the power of the U.S. economy to create wealth. And I'm here just as a reminder that it still does that. It's still a mechanism that does that here in America like no other place on the planet. If you live and you do a survey like this global asset management survey from Legg Mason that says you need at least $2.5 million to even have a chance to retire in America, it's because they're counting in and skewing all these ridiculous zip codes into the study. Marin County, average home price, average $1.9 million. Santa Barbara, $1.9 million. San Francisco, $1.7 million. If you go to Suffolk County, it's a really nice areas in Boston, a place called Bay Village. We're talking about zip codes, and if you're from Massachusetts, you know these zip codes: 02118, 02116, 02110. We're talking about prices in the average 2.3 all the way to $2.9 million range. New York, average list price, average right now, $4 million. Average. Then you look at the rest of the real world. The rest of the real world, that's what matters to you and me. Ohio, Michigan, Georgia, where we live today. Prices to live, real estate, they come way back down to earth. Georgia, average price, our state, $297,000. Most expensive county, you take out what there's one county, I think there's only one house for sale. It's skewed to like over $1 million. But come to Fulton County, $573,000 average house that's listed on the market. DeKalb County, I lived in DeKalb County for 10 years. Average house, $322 listed. Gwinnett County, $318. That's affordable. That's America. Cobb County, $390,000. Ohio, $190,000. Michigan, $212,000. Pennsylvania, $224,000 to live in a nice place in America. So America is not Palo Alto. It's not $2 million for a shack, or the island of Manhattan, where the average place to curl up next to a hedge fund analyst is $4 million, or the brownstones of Boston's Bay Village. America is right here in Atlanta. It's here, it's north of the city, it's west, it's east of the city. For 250 grand, you get a pretty darn nice place. 450 grand, pretty damn nice place to live. America is where most of you and I grew up. I grew up about an hour or so outside of Philadelphia if you go west, near Lancaster County, at the edge of Chester County. Right now, the average price in Lancaster County, average list price, $257,000. From my zip code, 19320, Coatesville, Pennsylvania. My father lives there today. Average price, $227,000. That's a beautiful place to live in America. So don't let all this fear-mongering that surrounds retirement planning scare you. You're going to hear studies and experts tell you that in order to get a solid, happy retirement, you got to have it's out of reach unless you hit these mega milestones: 2.5 million, 4 million. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. I'm not saying that those are not good goals to try to reach. I'd love to see it 2.5 million. I'd love to see it 5 million. I'd love to see it 10 or 15 million. I'm not saying that that's obviously not a bad goal to get to, but I want to try to help America understand, and not just the sliver of the 10th of 1%, that we can get there too. You can get there too. I see it every day here in the state of Georgia. So these experts are looking at surveys for only the top 5% or so of America. And to say that you need at least this much to survive is just, it puts a lot of people, it stops them dead in their tracks before they even start. And these studies, they also don't take into account the 99.9% of you who don't need to live in a few of the richest zip codes in America. Susie, who we've been on a campaign against, not against, but just a typical, she's all over, she has an entire issue of Money Magazine dedicated to her, saying you got to live to 70 and a half, or at least you got to work at least till you're 70. You see these surveys that say you got to get 2.5 million. I want to tell you that I want you to get to think of a more attainable number to begin with. And that's how I want to get to do the math to get to 500,000. And by the way, in my research in You Can Retire Sooner Than You Think, the book that I wrote a few years back, is more relevant today than it was even when I wrote it. That's why it's still selling. And if you find it on Amazon, you'll understand that the checkpoints to get to the 5 secrets in the book, one of them is to get to this happy retiree number of $500,000. You don't have to get to 2.5 million. It'd be great if you did, but we got to get to these checkpoints first, and 500,000 is the first one to reach. So living in Atlanta gives me that advantage to understand that we have a very affordable cost of living in this state, and I've learned that over the many years living here. And my research in You Can Retire Sooner Than You Think covers 46 different states, not just California, and not skewed to New York City. And that's why I see when we get to this 500,000, there's a phenomenon called the plateau effect, which means that once you get to a certain level, more money doesn't necessarily increase happiness anymore. In the early stages of accumulation, it does. But you get to this very important inflection point, $500,000 mark, that's the inflection point where folks move from slightly happy to the happy group, from moderate up to the extreme happiness level, and you stayed there. Net worth beyond 500,000, not found to have much additional impact on happiness. That's why this number, it's not a magical number, but it's the formula to get to 500,000. It's the first stop along the financial planning checkpoint that we need to get to before we worry about 2.5 million. Let's get to 500. How do you get there? And again, let's just do some math here. 500,000 sounds like a lot of money to most people, and it is, but it's a much more attainable goal than the 2 million or 3 million the surveys that we talked about today will tell you have to get to. It's still in the top 5 to 10% if you get to that point of Americans to get that much saved. But by talking to this group we're talking to millions of American families, not just a few thousand, right? We're talking about the upper 5% in America, 1.2 million households. The upper 1% is only about 1.2 million households. So today, if we take this number here to get to 500, we're talking between 5 and 10 million families. And I want to bring another 5 to 10 million families into the fold to do this. And how do you do it? You do it with $100 a month. Let's say you were to have 40 years, so age 20 to 60, realistically 25 to 65. All it takes is $100 to invest every month at 10% return, and your investment compounds monthly, and you'll have $637,000 at the end of 4 decades. If you're looking at just annual compounding, if you just did $1,200 a year and let it compound that way, the number still gets to $584,000. 10% rate, you say? Wait a minute. Despite 2 market corrections over the last 20 years, S&P 500 has still averaged over the last 8% a year, including dividends. REITs averaged 11% over the last 20 years. And over a longer period of time, in the last 40 years, the S&P 500 has averaged 11% per year when dividends are reinvested. Yes, those numbers are real. Thank you for tuning in here today to Money Matters. Find me and the team, wesmoss.com, WESMOSS.com. Email button. Those emails come straight to me and the Money Matters team. Enjoy the rest of this beautiful Sunday. Hi, I'm Wes Moss, and thanks for taking a minute to hear about what's so different about my new book, You Can Retire Sooner Than You Think. So unlike other retirement books, this book will give you a step-by-step guide, whether you're in your 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s, to learn from what these successful and happy retirees did to get there. I hope you enjoy the book, but more importantly, I know that it'll help you retire sooner than you think.